What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel Hand Waving. Your friend Naruto Addict 2.0 is here again with a brand new Naruto fanfic that's going to change everything. A story where Naruto is betrayed and banished. But destiny has bigger plans for him. From exile to emperor, this is the journey of power, strategy, and love. Today's fanfic is titled, What If Naruto Became the King of Pokégirls? Naruto X Pokemon Crossover, Part 1. 18 years ago, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the nine-tailed fox, the Lord of Demons, attacked the village of Konohagakure. In a desperate bid to save his village, the leader of Konohagakure, the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, sacrificed his life to seal the demon into his newborn son. Fearing that his countless enemies would seek to assassinate his newborn son, Minato named his son Uzumaki Naruto, taking his last name from Minato's wife, Uzumaki Kushina. Naruto's parentage was also kept secret, so that he would be kept safe. The Sandaime Hokage then took office again and passed a law, stating that it was an offense punishable by death to reveal to Naruto that he held the demon within him, hoping that Naruto would be allowed to live a normal life. However, it was all for naught. The adults viewed him as the demon itself and not the container. While they could not tell their children about the demon within him, they simply passed their hatred of Naruto down to the younger generation. Because his parents had died fighting the Kyuubi, Naruto was placed in the orphanage. Unfortunately, the head of the orphanage hated Naruto deeply, and when Naruto was 3, she finally had enough of him and kicked him out. Naruto lived on the streets for a whole year before the Sandaime found out about the situation and gave him a small apartment to live in as well as money for his daily necessities. When he was 9, the Sandaime registered him into the Shinobi Academy as he was frequently abused by the villagers and he wanted Naruto to have a means to protect himself. Unfortunately, the teachers were biased against him, preventing him from learning anything useful. He then resorted to being a class clown in order to garner attention. At the age of 12, Naruto failed the academy test for the 3rd time, causing him to be expelled. Mizuki, one of the teachers who hated him, tricked Naruto into thinking that there was a special test that he could take in order to pass. Following Mizuki's instructions, Naruto stole the scroll of forbidden techniques from the Hokage's vault and while waiting for Mizuki to turn up, learned one of the techniques within, the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, which allowed him to create corporeal copies of himself. Eventually, Iruka, one of the teachers who saw Naruto as a boy with a heavy burden and not the demon that he contained, showed up. Protecting Naruto from a sudden assault from Mizuki, he obtained a grievous injury in the process. Finally obtaining one person who truly cared for him other than the Sandaime Hokage, Naruto changed his dream then. He would become Hokage not to gain acknowledgement, but to protect those precious to him like Iruka. Using his vast reserves of chakra, the energy ninja used to power their techniques, Naruto created 1,000 Kage Bunshin and proceeded to beat up Mizuki. Seeing that Naruto had mastered such a high-level jutsu, Iruka gave Naruto his own Hitai-8, forehead protector, signifying that Naruto had passed the test and was officially a shinobi of Konohagakure. He was then placed on a team with Uchiha Sasuke and Haruno Sakura with Hatake Kakashi as his Junin sensei. Sasuke was the last of his clan having been slaughtered by his brother, Uchiha Itachi. Thus, Sasuke grew power-hungry, living only to kill his brother and thus achieve his revenge. He was the Rookie of the Year and thus had hordes of fan-girls chasing after him. Haruno Sakura was the top kunoichi in the class, relying on book smarts to achieve the best grades. Having very low chakra reserves, she had almost perfect control of her chakra. However, she knew no techniques except those taught in the academy. She was Naruto's crush, but she herself, like many others, was a fervent fangirl of Sasuke. Hatake Kakashi, also known as Sharingan Kakashi or Copy Nin Kakashi in other ninja villages, possessed the Sharingan, the bloodline of the Uchihas obtained from his teammate. He was the student of the Yondaime Hokage and had a very sad past that he never revealed to others. On their first major mission, AC rank mission to protect a bridge builder, Tazuna from the country of Wave, they encountered an A-rank missing nin Momochi Zabuza and his apprentice Haku, who possessed a bloodline to control water and ice, both of whom were sent by the tyrant Gedu to assassinate Tazuna. They clashed on the bridge that Tazuna was building, with Kakashi taking on Zabuza and Naruto and Sasuke taking on Haku. In the battle, Sasuke awakened his bloodline limit, the Sharingan. However, while it did help, it still proved futile as Haku was simply too skilled. Finally, in a bid to save Naruto, Sasuke took the blow meant for Naruto. Enraged at his best friend and rival's perceived death, Naruto called on the power of the Kyuubi for the first time, allowing him to overpower Haku. When the fight was over, it was revealed that Sasuke was merely placed in a near-death state and Team 7 emerged whole and with more experience. As gratitude to Naruto for reviving the courage in the people of Wave, they named the bridge the Great Naruto Bridge. When they returned, Kakashi nominated Team 7 for the Chunin exams. All proceeded well until the second part of the exams, where they encountered one of the Densetsu no Sannin, Orochimaru, a missing nin of Konohagakure. He proceeded to place a curse seal on Sasuke before leaving. In the 1-month break that the Genins had to prepare for the finals, Naruto met another of the Densetsu no Sannin, Jiraiya, the teacher of the Yondaime Hokage, taught him how to summon toads that the Yondaime Hokage had summoned as well. In the finals, Naruto faced off against the previous year's Rookie of the Year, Hyuga Neji, and managed to change his view of life. Shortly after that, an invasion occurred and Naruto faced off against the Jinchuriki of Suna, Sabaku no Gaara, once again obtaining a victory, thought summoning the Toad Boss. Through his unwavering determination to protect his teammates, he managed to convince Gaara that true strength came from wanting to protect others, thus changing Gaara's outlook in the process. Due to the Sandame's death when fighting Orochimaru, Jiraiya and Naruto were sent to find Tsunade, another of the Densetsu no Sannin, to be the Godime Hokage. Along the way, they encountered Uchiha Itachi when Sasuke mysteriously appeared, charging straight at Itachi before being soundly beaten. Itachi then escaped with his partner, Hoshigaki Kisame, when it was apparent that they were outclassed by Jiraiya. Jiraiya then started to teach Naruto the Rasengan, a deadly move created by the Yondaime Hokage which allowed him to beat Orochimaru's sidekick, Kabuto, when they appeared. After Tsunade had agreed to become the Godime Hokage, the minions of Orochimaru, the Sound Force, snuck into Konohagakure, tempting Sasuke to run to Orochimaru with promises of power that full control of the curse seal would give him. Desperate after being so soundly beaten by Itachi, Sasuke agreed to leave and together they fled Konoha. Sakura, however, caught Sasuke in the act of leaving and reported the incident the next day, after which a retrieval team was sent after Sasuke. Sasuke and Naruto then had a showdown at the Valley of the End, with Sasuke emerging as the victor as Naruto refused to deal the last blow that would kill Sasuke, someone he deemed as his brother. After Naruto had recovered from the heavy wounds that Sasuke inflicted on him, Jiraiya took Naruto on a 3-year training trip to keep him from being captured by Akatsuki, an organization that wanted to capture all the 9 Biju-tailed demons. Akatsuki was composed of many S-class ninjas, of which Uchiha Itachi and his partner were part of. Finally, after the 3 years, Naruto and Sasuke clashed once again, and though Naruto once again failed to bring Sasuke back to Konoha, he did prevent Orochimaru from taking control of Sasuke's body, which was Orochimaru's ultimate aim. Downtrodden with his lack of success, Naruto threw himself into his training, preparing for the time 3 years later when Orochimaru would once again try to take over Sasuke's body. Finally, the 3 years deadline ended and Orochimaru tried to take over Sasuke's body, only to be overpowered by the teen who was now much stronger. Sasuke then killed him and took control of Odogakure, the village that Orochimaru was leading. Because of the malignant influence of the curse seal, Sasuke slowly turned insane and then launched an attack against Konoha. Naruto had finished off the Akatsuki including Itachi. Because of this, Sasuke's sole dream, his drive to live, had disappeared, and in his deranged state, he pinned the blame on Naruto, who had stolen everything from him. Leading the forces to defend Konohagakure was Naruto, who was now feared throughout the world as his training had made him one of the strongest beings in the world. The only one even coming close to his strength was Sasuke, who had spurred himself to work harder when he heard of Naruto's achievements. Finally, after 3 years, the two rivals would clash once again. Naruto glared straight into the fully matured Sharingan of Sasuke, trying to find even a hint of humanity left in him. Sasuke had accessed the full power of the curse seal, turning him into a monster. Hand-like wings protruded from his back. His skin darkened in color and his normal black hair had lengthened and turned ivory white. Finally, a cross-shaped mark had appeared on his face, making him look like a very terrifying monster indeed. Meanwhile, Naruto had tapped into the Kyuubi's chakra, causing red chakra to flow out from him, making him look as if he was on flames. His pupils had turned to slits and turned from his normal blue color to a blood-red color. His nails and canines had lengthened as well, and 7 ethereal tails floated behind him. One of the parts of his training was training himself to fully utilize the Kyuubi's chakra without losing control of himself like he had in the past. While he could not go beyond 7 tails worth of power, he trusted that this would be enough to defeat Sasuke. The two rivals had been fighting for a very long time, and it was evident from the looks of the battlefield. Craters pockmarked the land, trees were completely severed or burnt, and rubble of multiple rocks lay scattered everywhere. The effect of using the Kyuubi's chakra for such an extended period of time was taking its toll on him, and he knew that Sasuke was also suffering from using the curse seal for such a long time. It was time to end this battle. He looked up and he saw that Sasuke had the same idea as he was performing the hand seals for his most powerful technique. The Yami Chidori, whereby he channeled the evil chakra of the curse seal into the Chidori, turning it a sickly purple. Meanwhile, Naruto concentrated and formed his most powerful jutsu so far, the Udama Fuden, Rasenshuriken, whereby he took the Rasengan that his father had created and added wind element manipulation and the chakra of the Kyuubi into it, creating a technique that could decimate an entire city wall with ease. The two charged at each other, their techniques roaring, and they clashed in a massive explosion, both of them struggling to gain supremacy over each other. Cease this foolishness, Sasuke. I will not let you destroy Konoha even if it costs my life, Naruto shouted. He was mine. I am an avenger. All that I had left was my vengeance, but you had to take it away from me. I will show you now what it feels like to lose your dream, your sole reason for living. Sasuke snarled as he pushed against Naruto. Now I shall lead my forces and finish off Konoha. Can't be Hokage over a wasteland, right? Sasuke mocked. Come to think of it, you can't be Hokage either if you die right here. With that, he thrust his arm forward with renewed vigor, pushing Naruto back a few inches. In retaliation, Naruto dug his heels and pumped even more chakra into his Udama Rasenshuriken, causing Sasuke to lose the ground he had gained. Sasuke bit back a curse as he struggled against Naruto. While he had before grudgingly respected Naruto's tenacity, this was just too much. No one should have been able to take the amount of punishment that Naruto had taken and still put up such a fight. For God's sake, Naruto had plowed through half of his forces before fighting him while he had engaged Naruto fresh. Suddenly, he caught movement from the corner of his eyes. Twisting his head a little bit, he saw that it was the elites from Konoha, the previous Rookie 9 and Team Guy, along with Tsunade, as well as the Suna trio Tamari, Kankuro and Gaara. He smirked as he saw a familiar pink color approaching them. Sasuke grimaced. This meant that his forces were either wiped out or in retreat, no doubt due to the blonde right in front of him. However, they could serve his purpose quite well. Naruto saw a smirk on Sasuke's face, and looking to the side, he saw what was making Sasuke smirk. His blood chilled. He knew what Sasuke was planning and he would not allow it. Moving his Udama Rasenshuriken to the right, he allowed Sasuke's Yami Chidori to continue on its path unimpeded, plunging straight into his heart before his Udama Rasenshuriken impacted with Sasuke and ripped him to shreds. Naruto cried out in pain as the arm embedded in his chest was forcefully pulled away from him, widening the wound and causing blood to gush out from the chest. He collapsed onto the floor, blood pooling around him. Naruto's comrades sprinted to his side, calling him frantically all the while. Hinata stared at Naruto's dead body, too stunned to say anything, merely able to shed tears for her crush's untimely death. She had always admired his determination and his ability to change others for the better. He was the one who changed her as well, giving her the courage needed to survive in this cruel world. But now, he was gone. Neji knelt beside Naruto, the infamous composure of the Hyugas gone as he stared at the one who had changed him for the better. Naruto, you promised that you would be Hokage and help me change the Hyugas. Isn't your Nindo to not break your word? Neji uttered as he gripped Naruto's hand tightly. His teammates placed their hands on his shoulder, also distressed at the sight of Naruto in this state. Tsunade could only stare at Naruto's broken body while memories of her dead loved ones flashed through her mind. Was she cursed to see all that she cared for die right in front of her? First there were Dan and Nawaki, then Jiraiya and now Naruto too. It was just too unfair. Sakura openly wept at the death of her teammate. Before, she had totally ignored Naruto or treated him like trash, preferring to instead chase after Sasuke. However, Naruto had continued protecting her, even at the risk of his own life. Now, he had died because of her. She knew what Sasuke's plan was likely to be the moment she saw him glance at them. Sasuke would turn away from Naruto and probably plunge the Yami Chidori into her, killing her. It was no big secret that while Naruto had given up on Sakura as a love interest, he had instead started treating Sakura as the sister he never had and was very protective of her. If Sasuke had killed her, or even any of the other, Sakura was sure that Naruto's mind would probably be broken, blaming himself for not being able to protect those he deemed as his precious people. However, what was most surprising was Gaara's reaction. Gaara had walked over to Naruto, kneeling down beside him, not even caring that the blood soaked into his pants. Taking out a golden Suna Hitai-8, he placed it on Naruto's chest. Uzumaki Naruto, you are an honorary shinobi of Sungekure and your deeds will forever be remembered. He intoned solemnly. On the other hand, when they thought about it again, it was not so surprising. It was after all Naruto who had turned Gaara into the caring cage that he was now, and he was the one who had gone after Akatsuki when they had kidnapped Gaara in order to extract the Shukaku from him. The rest of Naruto's comrades merely stood there gazing at him, mourning in their own way. Suddenly, an utterly evil and malevolent chakra washed over them, causing them to freeze in terror. Naruto's body was floating in mid-air amidst an inferno of chakra. One thought immediately crossed the mind of everyone present. Is the Kyuubi escaping? Even though they were exhausted, they shifted into battle stances and prepared to do battle should the Kyuubi escape somehow. They would respect Naruto's actions and protect Konoha with their life like he had done so. Meanwhile, in Naruto's mindscape, things were going differently. I imagined my last moment to be kissing Sakura-chan while bidding farewell to everyone, not staring at a giant fur ball, Naruto deadpanned. Silence, insolent meatbag. I shall not die today because of your foolish actions. Snarled the Kyuubi as it used its tails to carve demonic runes into the floor of its cage. Naruto looked on with curiosity before he remarked, you do know that whatever you do, the seal combined with my willpower will prevent you from escaping, right? I have long been resigned with the fact that I shall remain trapped within you forever, flesh bag. Now keep quiet and let me do my work. The Kyuubi snarled. Well, it appears that you have gone senile then. Even you chakra cannot heal me when my heart is totally gone. Oh well, it was bound to happen sooner or later anyways. You have already lived for over 10,000 years after all, Naruto snickered. The Kyuubi merely ignored him as it drew some seals around the runes. Naruto scratched his head trying to remember where he had seen those particular seals before as they looked very familiar. Wait a minute. Those are seals that deal with ripping open a dimensional portal. I know because almost all of my stuff is stored within those dimensional portals. You must be joking, Kyuubi. That harebrained scheme of yours will never work. Who knows what you might unleash on the world? Naruto screamed as he rushed forward into the cage that the Kyuubi was sealed in, with the intent of stopping the Kyuubi. However, he was too late as the Kyuubi had already completed the seals. Naruto was slammed against the walls of the cage as the Kyuubi poured forth all of its chakra into the seals, causing them to glow red before turning into a bright white flash. In the real world, the chakra around Naruto suddenly subsided before a bright flash emanated from Naruto's body, and when those gathered had regained control of their sight, Naruto's body was nowhere to be seen. Travis stopped and collapsed at the foot of a tree, leaning against the trunk as he was utterly exhausted. His Beatrice copied his movements and sighed in relief as she finally got some rest. There were rumors that a frost whelp had been sighted in the forests nearby. What a frost whelp was doing here so far away out in a temperate area he did not know, but it did not matter. He was still a rookie, having been a tamer for only a month, and if he managed to capture such a rare and powerful Pokégirl, his reputation would definitely increase. Suddenly, he saw a bright flash of light around 1 kilometer away to their right. Looking at Beatrice, they nodded simultaneously as they headed towards the origins of the flash. That might be where the frost whelp was, or at the very least they should be able to gather some leads as to the location of the frost whelp. What they saw when they arrived sickened them. In the middle of a crater lay a blonde male who was about 180 centimeters tall. He wore black pants that had been burned off near the knees. His shirt was gone, exposing the horrible wound that the blonde had. There was a huge hole in his chest that Travis was sure that he could put his arm through, not that he would want to, and he could see the rib cage and even the heart of the man. Travis barely resisted the urge to vomit, although his Pokégirl failed to do so. Being brought up in a Pokeranch, Beatrice led a relatively sheltered life, and something like this was way beyond what she could handle. As Travis looked closer though, he saw that the wounds on the blonde were actually healing visibly. He could see the muscles knit back together and new skin grow. In a few moments, other than all the blood and the scar on the blonde's chest, there was no evidence of the blonde ever being injured so seriously. Travis knelt right beside the blonde. Even though the wounds had been healed, the blonde was still far from safe. He still remained unnaturally pale and his pulse was very weak, barely discernible in fact. Calling Beatrice over after she had finished regurgitating her previous meal, he told her to use her vine whip to carry him before setting off for the poke center in town. That frost whelp would just have to wait. 3 days later, Travis found himself in front of a room door waiting for permission to enter. He had received a call from the poke center, telling him that the blonde he had rescued had awoken. Seeing as there were absolutely no records on the blonde, they had decided to peg Travis with the job of looking after the blonde until he recovered, seeing as he was the one who had rescued the blonde. Finally, a week, come in, was heard and Travis entered, with Beatrice and the nurse Joy behind him. The moment he entered, he was the recipient to a cry of, "What the is that?" Taking a moment to recover his bearings from the flash, he instantly turned on the Kyuubi, only to be utterly shocked at what he saw. The Kyuubi was normally extremely large, with malevolent red eyes, 9 tails waving in the air and a constant oppressive aura being exuded. What he saw now though, was a shadow of what the Kyuubi had been. It had shrunk until it was shorter than he was, about 160 centimeters, and while it still retained the aura and the eyes, the effects were greatly lessened. What shocked Naruto the most though was the fact that the Kyuubi had only 1 tail. "What the happened, Kyuubi?" Naruto exclaimed. The Kyuubi raised its head to look at him, before simply lying down and resting its head on its paws. Naruto was going to march over and demand an answer when the Kyuubi answered him. "I saved your life. That is what happened, mortal." Naruto merely stood there, waiting for further explanation. The Kyuubi finally got tired of Naruto staring at it and elaborated. "What I did was to try and reverse the flow of time by a few seconds, back to just before the red-eyed boy with the black lightning incinerated your heart. However, if I just did that, the whole flow of time in your world would be warped, therefore I had to throw in interdimensional travel so that the reversing of time happened when you were traveling in between the dimensions, thus affecting nothing. The moment you arrived, my chakra went to work, healing your wounds. As for my current state, here," the Kyuubi paused for a while, clearly distressed at the loss of its power. Reversing the flow of time requires a tremendous amount of energy, even if it just a few seconds. Don't forget the energy required to rip apart the dimensional fabric, pass through it and rip yet another hole. Because your bloody father sealed only my soul and not my body into you, what you see here is pure energy. Therefore, when the energy required was more than I had in my reserves, it took away my tails and a lot of my body away to compensate, reducing me into this pitiable state. Naruto pondered over the Kyuubi's explanation before he found something strange. Wait, where did all of your chakra go then? I know what no matter what energy cannot disappear. It would still dissipate and remain as chakra residue. However, for such a huge amount of energy expended, just having residue is impossible. Ah, you do have brains in that skull of yours. Naruto merely glared at the Kyuubi. Well, you see, the energy was built up in your world but released in between the dimensions. However, the energy cannot exist in between the dimensions. Nothing can. Therefore, it returned to your body as chakra. Your chakra. Naruto took a moment to digest, making sure that he had heard everything clearly. So that means that. Yes, it means that you are now the equal or superior of the Hachibi in term of raw power. Now, return to your body and rest. You need time to heal your injuries as well get used to new amount of chakra. I refuse to die after all I have done merely because you did not take care of yourself. Too stunned from the earlier revelations to disobey, Naruto exited his mindscape, let the darkness envelope him. Naruto regained consciousness slowly, fighting against the sunlight that was shooting straight into his eyes. When he heard footsteps approaching the room he was in though, his shinobi training took over. His eyes snapped open and his muscles tensed. He immediately memorized everything he could of his surroundings. He was lying on a soft white bed, with tubes and wires connected to him. The tubes and wires led to a beeping machine that he recognized as a hospital tool used to monitor one's heartbeat. Looking around, he saw that there were only possible portals for exit, a door and a window. Added to that, other than the bed, the machines, a table and some chairs, there was absolutely nothing he could use as a weapon. Attempting to channel some of his chakra, he found that it was much more concentrated, probably a result of the Kyuubi's chakra becoming his, and almost uncontrollable. This left only taijutsu as his weapons were all gone. Flexing his muscles, he grinned as he noticed that all of his muscles were in working condition and in fact much denser than they had been before the incident. His speed, strength and reflexes had increased exponentially and he was sure that even without jutsus, he would be able to take down many opponents before he went down. His sense had evidently also improved, as he had heard the person when the person was still at least 4 rooms away. Sniffing the air, he found that the scent of the person was distinctly female and not quite human. Tensing his muscles, Naruto prepared to pounce upon the strange non-human that was approaching him. When the door opened though, what he saw made him very confused. Holding a clipboard was a redhead who was dressed in a nurse's uniform. Upon noticing that he was awake, the nurse greeted him with a smile. Hello there. My name is Candace. Now lay still while I do some final checks, alright? Naruto let the nurse do her as he tried to decipher what his senses told him. His eyes told him that the nurse was a human while his nose told him that the nurse was in fact not human. In the end though, he decided that it did not matter as she did not seem to wish harm on him. Excuse me, sir. Are you alright? Naruto realized to his chagrin that he had been spacing out for a very long while the nurse was talking to him. If Ero Sennin, what he calls Jiraiya, ever knew of this, his training would most likely be doubled. A ninja was supposed to be fully aware of his surroundings. Sir. Hello. The nurse asked as she waved a hand right in front of Naruto's face. Naruto realized that he had once again zoned out. This had to stop immediately. Sorry there, Candace, right? The nurse nodded, showing Naruto that he gotten the nurse's name right. Well, you see, I don't really remember what happened, so I was trying to regain my bearings. I'm really sorry if I offended you. Naruto apologized while mentally congratulating himself. The amnesia excuse was the most often applied but most effective method, as people would feel pity for the victim and not question the victim too much. Since he was not a native of this dimension, if he did not know something that was supposed to be common knowledge, he could play it off as his amnesia. He was so smart. He noticed though that the nurse had seemed shocked when he had apologized to her. He decided that it was a trick of the light though, as the nurse's expression had returned to normal. Well, everything is working fine, so just wait right here while I call up your rescuer and finalize the papers for your discharge, okay? Naruto simply nodded before going back to his musings. He would have to get more information about this dimension. Perhaps this rescuer could help him. After all, every good shinobi, that information can be the key to a successful mission or your death. Breaking out of his thoughts, Naruto decided that since he could not act without information and the information would not be arriving until some time later, he might as well use this time to gain as much control over his new chakra as he could. Getting up, he channeled chakra to his feet and proceeded to try and walk up the walls. 3 hours later, Naruto smirked as he stood upside down on the ceiling like a bat. Where before it had taken him 3 days to master this exercise, now he took only 3 hours. His ears twitched as he once again heard footsteps approaching his room. Dropping down to the floor lightly, he leapt onto his bed and waited for the nurse and his rescuer to arrive. The first to step though was a male of a height of around 170 centimeters, had brown hair and gray eyes. He was wearing jeans, a white t-shirt as well as a black vest. All in all, he looked normal. What stepped through next though utterly shocked Naruto. It was evident that it was a female from the hue that she had, was green in color. Her skin and hair were both a deep green, with small darker patches of green patterning her skin in just like a cheetah's spots. Since it was only wearing a shirt that came to just below her, the most damning evidence that she was not a human was displayed for the whole world to see. There was a large plant bulb, about the size of a rec ball, growing on her lower back. When he was part of Anbu, he had been trained to keep silent and simply observe. However, all of this training went flying out of his head the moment he saw the creature. Thus, he could not control himself and he cried out, "What the is that?" Travis was taken aback at the sudden cry. Looking at the blonde, he noticed that the blonde was gesturing wildly at Beatrice. While many tamers treated their Pokégirls as thrash or worse, he respected his Pokégirl very much and he was not going to let some idiot insult his Pokégirl by insinuating that Beatrice was a thing. Candace, however, seemed to know what he was thinking as she moved to restrain him. "Don't make such a big fuss. He has amnesia, most likely gotten from whatever happened to him, and thus it is likely that he has forgotten all about the existence of Pokégirls." "Oh," was all Travis could say as he felt slightly guilty at his reaction. It's nice to know that there are tamers who treat us Pokégirls like people instead of creatures, Candace said as she smiled at Travis. Travis smiled back at Candace. "Well, I guess we should go fill him in on what he does not know then," Travis said as he walked towards the blonde. Naruto sighed as he lay back on the bed. He was currently in Travis's guest room. Travis had offered Naruto a room to stay in and said that Naruto could pay him the rent next time when he earned enough money. Since his chakra control was nowhere near perfect yet, he gratefully accepted Travis's offer. He had spent the whole day learning about the world that he was currently in. It was different. Very, very different. Apparently, the green-skinned creature that he had encountered earlier on was something called a Pokégirl, to be exact. Pokégirls were rampant throughout the world, a result of the experiments of a mad scientist named Sukebe. A master of technology and magic, this is the person responsible for the creation of Pokégirls and the scars created from his war. A great pervert, mage, and scientist, he created the Pokégirls as his slaves and later as his way to get revenge. After he was discovered to be doing genetic experiments, it was initially thought his first lab was destroyed, and from the destroyed lab came the cursed Jusenkyo spell dump. Several years later, Sukebe came back and this time he used his powers to unleash a nightmare to the people of the earth. Sukebe's revenge lasted for a great many years. Sukbi's revenge was basically him introducing humanity to his form of hell. A plague which killed millions and left nearly all females sterile, soldiers that were far beyond the powers of existing science, and other things the world thought only existed in fairy tales. The war united the world, which at the time was divided into something called nations, and sparked research into developing something that could combat Sukbi's super soldiers, the Pokégirls. The most famous battle was the Battle of Sanbei, where the first energy weapons were used and the beginning of the tamer forces was created. Sukbi's forces were barely defeated, thanks to the discovery that wild Pokégirls can be controlled by chosen people called tamers. Also, since most human females had been rendered infertile thanks to the plague, it was discovered that Pokégirls could bear human children as well as Pokégirls, males always human and some females human. However, almost all technology had been lost except those that dealt with stolen technology on Pokégirls. After Sukbi's revenge had been fought, the need for tamers still existed as most Pokégirls had become feral and uncontrolled. Now, several hundred years after Sukbi's revenge, humanity is just beginning to recover. Pokégirls are now somewhat accepted, tamers are now accepted as full-time jobs, pureblood human females are getting rarer since most breeding is done with Pokégirls, technology has been slowly losing its bad reputation from Sukebe, and humans must learn the full extent of the world they live in now. Naruto was curious about these tamers that kept popping up during the discussion, and after some questioning, he finally understood what they were. A tamer was a person whose primary job was to make sure that the feral Pokégirls of the world don't finish what Sukebe tried to do. In order to do this, they had to tame other Pokégirls to fight for them, as the only effective way to fight a Pokégirl is with another Pokégirl. In order for a tamer to be official, they must pass a somewhat easy test to gain their basic license. After passing the test, tamers will be given identifications saying what they are, normally a Pokédex, 6 poke balls, a copy of the award-winning book Taming for Dummies, and congratulations. In order for them to have more than 6 Pokégirls, they must pass a more advanced test for a storage license. No matter what level the tamer is at or what they have passed, they are only allowed to carry 6 Pokégirls with them at any time. Tamers are considered to be fulfilling a league function in their jobs, i.e., taming is not part of the private sector, but they are not paid for what they do. They survive by living off the land, as detailed in Taming for Dummies, since the book has everything a tamer needs to know, and by frequently visiting the ever-helpful poke centers. Most tamers have family and friends they can also count on for extra cash, clothing, food, and shelter as well. While taming was mentioned frequently, Naruto just took it to be training the Pokégirls. After all, tamers were supposed to use Pokégirls to fight other Pokégirls, right? How could they fight if they were not trained adequately? But the one fact that caught Naruto's interest was the fact that traveling all over the world was expected of a tamer. While he did not hold much hope, perhaps he might be able to find a way to get back to his dimension without expending the amount of energy that the Kyuubi had if he traveled around as a tamer. The Kyuubi was made of pure energy while he was still human. The process of opening the dimensional portals again might very well kill him. Seeing as he would not be getting much sleep tonight with all of these thoughts in his head, he decided to train. A good training exercise did always make him feel much more relaxed. Sliding open the window silently, he crouched on the window sill measuring the distance between where he was currently and the rooftop of the closest building. Channeling some chakra to his legs, he tensed his legs and jumped, easily clearing the distance and landing on the rooftop. Running across the rooftop, he jumped to another rooftop when he reached the edge. He continued in this fashion until he reached the forest where he was found and headed in deep enough so that the noise from his training would not affect others. Naruto crept into his room and slid the window close. It had been a good exercise. Tiring and fulfilling, ensuring that he would get a good night's sleep. Now came the part that he dreaded the most. When a Kage Bunshin is dispersed, all of its memories are transferred back to the ninja who created the clones. Thus, they are a very effective means of training as they would cut down the time needed to understand a concept and the like. Even the increase in chakra control was also passed along. Also, Since they required a high amount of chakra, continually producing cage bunshin would increase one's chakra reserves. However, with the huge amount of chakra that Naruto now had, he created over 10,000 cage bunshin to train with. Therefore, when he released his technique, 10,000 memories would flow into his head. The human brain was not made to handle such abuse. Luckily for Naruto, he had the Kyuubi's chakra to heal the damage done. Bracing himself, he released the technique and immediately he was assaulted with the memories of each individual clone. Due to the information overload, he lost consciousness and sank into blissful sleep. Waking up early the next morning, Naruto went through his daily rituals and put on his new clothes, a black t-shirt and black pants that he had borrowed from Travis before walking to the dining table where breakfast was being placed. Breakfast today consisted of ham, bacon, eggs and pancakes cooked by Beatrice. Thanking Beatrice for the heavenly smelling meal, Naruto muttered a quick, "Itadakimasu," before stuffing himself full. Travis and his Pokégirl looked on in amazement as Naruto devoured his 16th pancake. This was after 8 slices of bacon, 2 eggs and 8 slices of ham. "Where do you put it all?" Travis asked in wonder as Naruto started on his 18th pancake. Beatrice merely beamed, happy at finding someone who appreciated her cooking so much. Travis never did manage to finish off all of what Beatrice had cooked. After knowing more about Pokégirls yesterday, Naruto had apologized profusely to Beatrice for his outburst when he first saw Beatrice. While it was only one more person, Beatrice was happy to have found someone else other than Travis who respected her as a person and not as a creature or slave like other tamers did. Added to that, this same person enjoyed her cooking. It was perfect. Suddenly, Travis's comlink beeped loudly, indicating that someone was trying to contact him. Opening it up, he found that it was Candace, the nurse Joy, who was trying to contact him. "Travis, you told me to contact you with the frost whelp was sighted, right?" Travis nodded, hoping that his intuition was right. He was right. "Well, I received a patient just now who was attacked by the frost whelp 5 kilometers into the forest, roughly 1 o'clock from your house." Travis muttered a quick thank you before returning Beatrice to her Pokeball and sprinted out of the house, Naruto right behind him. "Naruto, why are you following me? This is dangerous and you just recovered," Travis asked while continuing at a dead sprint. "Don't worry, I feel a lot better already. Besides, I was thinking about being a tamer and seeing a real live battle would help me make a better decision than any book would." Travis nodded at Naruto's explanation. It was logical. Added to that, he saw that Naruto was keeping up easily with him, not even breaking a sweat while Travis himself was already panting. They finally arrived at the area where the frost whelp had appeared. There were deep gashes in the trunks of the trees that were frosted over as well as some crater on the ground. The frost whelp had definitely come here. Travis released Beatrice while Naruto extended his chakra outwards, searching for any chakra signatures. Suddenly, he detected a chakra moving towards them at speeds that no normal animal should be able to achieve. Realizing that it was the frost whelp, Naruto was just in time to push Travis away before his head was severed from his neck. Grabbing hold of the frostwhelp's outstretched arm, he used her momentum against her, throwing her into a tree. Naruto reached to his side for a katana before he realized that it had already been broken by Sasuke's kusanagi. That second of hesitation cost him as the frost whelp recovered from his throw and sprang at him. Naruto dodged to his right immediately. However, he still received a nick on his cheek which was slowly coated by a layer of ice. A second slower and it would have been his eyes. The frost whelp hissed in frustration as she crouched down, preparing to attack. Naruto took a second to evaluate his opponent while Travis took out his Pokédex. The frostwhelp's complexion was milk white, with white hair and silver eyes. She stood at about 165 centimeters. She had a perfect figure and would have looked like a very beautiful woman if not for the 1-inch claws that she possessed as well as the white tail flailing behind her. Frost whelps are extremely rare, normally found only in the deep reaches of the Arctic. However, sometimes one of frost whelps will wander out of the Arctic reaches and enter more temperate regions. It is believed that the frost whelps do so as a test of sorts. With the element of ice, the normal bane of dragon-type Pokégirls, the ice element is negated. While this does add more weaknesses to the frost whelp, they are but that, weaknesses and not the Achilles heels that other dragons have. Added to that, while their skin is colder than normal, it is not to the freezing point like other ice-type Pokégirls, making taming much easier. Finally, they are very beautiful and would make a welcome addition to any tamer's harem. Frost whelps are close-range fighters, preferring to get up close and personal with their opponents. They use their ice abilities to slow down their opponents before finishing off their opponents with their superior speed. However, it is to be noted that they are quite frail and a very strong blow should be enough to knock them down. Travis, however, noted something else that the Pokédex had listed. Naruto, this frost whelp is already at level 25. She is way beyond our abilities. Travis had started to panic. While he knew that he would be at a disadvantage taking on an ice type with a grass type, he was not expecting the level range to be so huge. Beatrice was only level 15. Naruto only smirked at him. Travis, relax. I'll handle it. Travis was about to tell Naruto to run before he got killed when Naruto suddenly blurred out of sight and then reappeared in front of the frost whelp before punching her hard in the stomach, causing her to double over in pain. Naruto then initiated his combo. With that, Naruto kicked upwards, causing the frost whelp to go flying up into the air due to the force of the kick. Naruto created a cage bunshin which leapt onto the original's shoulders and using that as a launching pad, jumped up and kicked the frost whelp in the chin once again, sending her flying even higher. Naruto was mildly impressed at the fact that the frostwhelp's neck had not snapped yet. Most of his opponents had died at this point. However, his combo was not finished yet. A third clone popped into existence and slammed his knee into the frostwhelp's abused stomach, causing her to once again double over in pain. This time though, she coughed up blood as well. A fourth clone was formed above the frost whelp and it punched her spine hard, putting all of its weight behind it and letting gravity do most of the damage. Naruto Renden. Suddenly, all of the clones puffed into clouds of smoke, revealing the original flying down towards the frost whelp, one leg stretched out as he delivered a crushing axe kick, sending the frost whelp crashing into the ground while Naruto landed lightly beside her. The frost whelp was plainly unconscious. Looking towards Travis, he asked for a Pokeball which Travis absent-mindedly handed over to him, too stunned at the events that had transpired. Only when Naruto had successfully captured the frost whelp did Travis regain his senses. What just happened? Who the hell are you, Naruto? Travis demanded. Naruto merely sighed. He knew that this was going to happen sooner or later, but he had not expected to have been forced to show off his abilities that quickly. At least he had not used any of his jutsus. I'll explain later. Let's heal this frost whelp first, okay? Travis nodded in agreement. First they would make sure that the frost whelp was healed and then he would get some answers. A few minutes later and they were at the Poke Center. So, what brings you here so fast? Candace asked. In response, Naruto handed her the frost whelp. Scanning it, the nurse Joy gasped in surprise. Oh my, you captured it so quickly. You must truly be a talented tamer, Travis. Shaking his head, Travis placed credit where it was due. Actually, Naruto did all the work. In fact, without him, I would probably not be alive right now. At this, Candace turned confused. I was not under the impression that Naruto had a Pokégirl or was even a tamer. He is not. He beat the frost whelp by himself. But that's impossible. Well, you should have seen what Beatrice and I saw when we first encountered Naruto. Oh, what did you see? Naruto was getting annoyed at this point. He was tired of people talking about him right in front of him as though he was not even there. Candace, could you please heal the frost whelp? Throw in a level 3 taming cycle as well please. At the last part, Naruto turned to look at Travis for confirmation. When Travis nodded, Naruto continued. Yes, a level 3 taming cycle. I would also like to take a tamer test and should I pass, please register the frost whelp in my harem. By the way, Can you also use a T2 training technique machine for language and generally everything the frost whelp needs to about the world on her? I will of course pay for the service. Nodding in understanding, Candace took the Pokeball containing the frost whelp away to be healed. She returned shortly with a form that she handed to Naruto. Normally, you would have to do some medical checkups to make sure that you were fit to be a tamer. However, since you were here just yesterday, I have your medical records already. Added to that, you managed to beat the frost whelp by yourself, which shows that you are clearly very fit. Now, please fill in that form. Naruto quickly filled in the form and handed the form to Candace, where she read it out. Name: Uzumaki Naruto. Age: 18. Gender: male. Place of origin: England, Aberdeen. At this part, Candace stopped and looked at Naruto questioningly. Well, since I can't remember where I come from, might as well make this place my place of origin then. Naruto shrugged. Candace accepted his explanation and continued. League: Blue League. Well then, that's it. You are now officially a tamer. Candace said as she passed Naruto a Pokédex and the time-honored Taming for Dummies book. Naruto looked at the grimaced. It reminded him of when he been called dead last, when he was young. After a few minutes, Candace returned with the Pokeball along with a receipt. Taking it, he saw the price of the T2S. SLC 50,000. Naruto exclaimed. Candace glared at him. T2s are very expensive as they are one use only. Don't tell you can't afford that or else. Naruto merely chuckled nervously. He had forgotten that a different dimension would use a different currency. Of course I have the money, just let me search for it. With that, Naruto dug in his pockets. It was time for some of his shinobi training to come into use. Attaching a chakra string to a pebble on the ground, Naruto flicked it into his pocket. He then performed some hand seals, disguising them as him searching deeply. First, he placed a henge transformation on it, followed by a genjutsu, illusory technique, that would divert anyone's attention, making them only glance cursory at it. This way, the henge could last longer without someone disrupting the illusion. Finally, Naruto pulled out from his pocket a diamond ring. "Oh, will this do?" he asked Candace. Since he had never ever seen the currency in this world, he could place a henge on it. Thus, he had elected to turn it into something valuable. The nurse Joy just nodded, speechless at the sight of the diamond ring, and handed him his frost whelp. Now that was a new concept. He was now responsible for someone before shooing Travis and Naruto out of the Poke Center so that she could admire the ring. Once outside, Travis turned on Naruto. Okay, what was that? I know that you did not have that ring yesterday, and no one here in this small town is rich enough to afford such a costly item. Naruto looked around, and seeing that were a few people looking at them curiously, he motioned for Travis to move closer. When Travis did so, Naruto whispered in his ears, "Let's talk in the forest, okay? People here might overhear." Naruto and Travis had finally found a large clearing in the forest to suit his purpose. Okay. Now, spill. Travis demanded. Patience is a virtue, young one. What do you mean, young one? You are only 1 year older than me. Naruto chuckled at how easily it had been to change topics before he performed a few hand seals. Slamming his hands on the ground, he exclaimed, Mokuden, Shichuka no Jutsu. Wood release. 4-pillar house technique. Travis gaped at the huge wooden house that had suddenly burst from the ground while Naruto looked on with deep pride. The Mokuden jutsus were supposed to be able to be performed only by 2 people, the Shidaime Hokage, due to his bloodline, and one of Naruto's senseis, Tenzo, due to an experiment performed on him. There were normally only 5 elemental releases, with them being Kaden, Fire Release, Suiden, Water Release, Fuden, Wind Release, Doden, Earth Release, and Raiden, Lightning Release. Elements like wood were formed by mixing Suiden and Doden together. However, this required very high-level earth and water manipulation, and thus only those with a bloodline limit could perform Mokuden jutsus. Naruto, as usual, had found a way around this complication. Because he had been the container of the Kyuubi for so long, some of its traits were naturally passed on to him, like the 3 whisker marks on each side of his cheeks, enhanced hearing and smell. However, it had also granted him one of the traits that had made the Kyuubi so feared: complete mastery over every element. With this, the Mokuden were no longer out of his reach. If he wanted to, he could even manipulate ice like Haku did by mixing wind and water together. Now, he could perform Mokuden jutsus better than even his sensei, Tenzo, could. After basking in his sense of achievement for a moment, he moved towards the gigantic house and motioned for Travis to enter. "I thought you wanted answers, Travis. Well, come in then." Travis scooped his jaws off the floor and followed Naruto in. Once he entered, he saw that the house was very well furnished. "Wait a minute, will you, Travis? The frost whelp deserves to hear this as well, and I do not feel like repeating myself." Agreeing with Naruto, Travis watched as Naruto released the frost whelp. She knelt on the floor and bowed her head in Naruto's direction. "Master, command me," she said, only to receive a groan as a reply. As one, both Travis and the frost whelp looked at him curiously, only to see him muttering to himself. According to Travis, ferals are supposed to be more rude and direct, right? Why do I have a simpering idiot here? Must be the T2S. They probably ingrained the proper way a Pokégirl should behave into her. The frost whelp was indignant at being called a simpering idiot, and displayed this by slamming her tail and snarling at Naruto, "The only fool I see here is you." Before she cringed, realizing what she had done. When she did not receive the beating that the T2 had told her she would get, she looked up confused only to see Naruto chuckling silently. "Well, it seems that you have spunk the T2 failed to remove. Good." Naruto then sat down on one of the chairs nearby and mentioned for Travis and the frost whelp to do the same. It was time for him to share his life story. While he would leave out the parts like the Kyuubi, they deserved to know who he was. Travis had helped him continuously without expecting any sort of returns, and the frost whelp was going to be part of his harem, part of his team. Taking a deep breath, he began his story. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto and I hail from a village called Konoha, also known as Konohagakure." The frost whelp and Travis took a moment to digest what Naruto had told them. Who could have known that he hid so much power behind that easygoing nature of his? Seeing that it was dark, Travis excused himself, wanting to reach home before he got lost in the forest. "Naruto, I thank you for sharing your past with me. I know that you are holding back something, but I respect that. Know that no matter what, you will be my friend." With that, Travis left. Naruto smiled as Travis's words touched him before he turned to the frost whelp. "So, what is your name? I can't very well go around calling you frost whelp, right? I do not have a name, master." At this, Naruto groaned. "First off, do not call me master. I may lead you, but I do not own you, understand? Where I came from, females had equal rights as males. As I already told you, the god I'm Hokage, Tsunade, is a female. And as for a name, would Riley do?" Nodding in acceptance, the newly named Riley then asked Naruto, "Well then, how should I address you?" "Just call me Naruto, that's what my friends all call me." Riley looked shocked at the fact that Naruto viewed her as a friend. Naruto then decided to nip this problem in the bud before it became a problem later on. "Listen here, I do not care what the T2 taught you. Other tamers might treat their Pokégirls as inferior creatures, but not me. You will be my comrade, not my subordinate. Now, go to bed." Arrows suddenly appeared on the walls of the house, with the words, "Riley's room," above them. "Follow the arrows and you will reach your bedroom. Rest well tonight. I am going to make you a Pokégirl to be feared, so tomorrow your training will start." Riley nodded and followed the arrows, all the while repressing a shudder that had suddenly appeared when he mentioned the word, training. Naruto watched as Riley walked up the stairs before he pondered on what to do. Apparently, after his normal human chakra had absorbed the Kyuubi's chakra, his chakra had been turned part demonic. The traits that he had been given earlier by the Kyuubi's chakra were strengthened, and it seemed like he had gained another trait. he now needed much less sleep than a normal human being. Even after all the action earlier on in the day, he was still brimming with energy, and he suspected that if he had not gone training last night, he would probably have gained only 2 hours of sleep and wake up feeling perfectly fine. Now though, he did not know what to do and he was starting to get bored. A bored Naruto is a dangerous Naruto, which the villagers and his friends would testify to. There was a very simple reason for this. When Naruto is bored, that is when his most wacky ideas came into play. Sure, they worked out in the end, but still, the process was terrifying. Thus, in an effort to alleviate his boredom, he rummaged in his pockets, hoping that he would find something that would amuse him for the time being. Finally, his hands touched a metallic object. Pulling it out, he saw that it was the Pokédex that he had received from the Nurse Joy earlier on. Opening it up, he saw that the first thing that was displayed was all of his information. Naruto frowned as he saw that all of his information would be displayed for the world to see if they scanned him with his Pokédex. This would not do. As a shinobi, completing a mission quickly required that he caught his opponent unawares. However, if everyone could see the strength of his harem, then he would lose his advantage. Suddenly, his eye gleamed in a familiar way that would send anyone who knew him scurrying for cover. In his travels with Jiraiya during their training trip, he had come across a few villages that possessed very high technology. Thus, he had obtained quite a few technological skills. While the Pokédex was indeed complicated, it was nothing compared to some of the machines he had come across. Grinning maniacally, he set about dismantling the Pokédex. Naruto grinned in satisfaction as he gazed upon his work. While it still looked like an ordinary Pokédex, he had configured to be a top-notch hacking tool. If he wanted to, he could simply scan a lock with his Pokédex, and within seconds, his Pokédex would download the code from a satellite he had overrode earlier on and then render the lock useless. Added to that, unless a gym leader or someone of equal authority scanned him, they would receive results that would utterly frustrate them. In other words, all that they would know was his name and age. Gym leaders would know a little bit more, specifically what Pokégirls he contained in his harem and their names. However, their levels and everything else would not be displayed. On the other hand, he had access to as much information as he wanted. With one scan, he would gain access to the tamer's basic information as well as his number of battles, his win-loss ratio and everything else under the sun, down to what their ancestors had bought on a certain day and time. However, he was still far from tired. While this would prove useful out in the field where he could keep watch almost all day long, it was only being a nuisance to him as he was quickly becoming bored. He couldn't train as well due to the state that his clothes were in. Due to the training last night and the fight with Riley earlier, the clothes that Travis had provided him with was being held together by a thread. Any strenuous activity and he could bid farewell to these clothes. Thus, training was out of the option. Wait a minute. If he remembered correctly, he had sealed an extra set of Anbu clothes into a scroll and tossed it into his dimensional storage. Quickly forming the shape of the seal in his mind, he projected the image onto the wall beside him and watched as a black hole suddenly appeared where he had projected the seal to be. Oh, should be on, I think. XD. Nay, common misconception o seals was that they had to be drawn with ink. Naruto had discovered that if a shinobi had enough chakra and enough focus, he could simply project the image of the seal onto any surface, pump in the required amount of chakra and the seal would activate. Of course, this method was rather risky because if a shinobi's focus wavered for just a second, who knows what kind of damage would occur. Rummaging inside the dimensional hole, he felt the familiar numb feeling creep up his arm before he finally found the scroll he was looking for. Taking it out, he took a look to confirm that it was the scroll he was looking for. Seeing that it was the one he had been looking for, he ceased focusing on the seal and closed the dimensional hole. Unrolling the scroll that was titled Master Scroll, he saw numerous kanji for mundane stuff like toiletries. Finally, he found the kanji for clothes and tapped it lightly, causing a scroll titled Scroll for Clothes to pop out. Unrolling this scroll, he tapped the kanji for male, causing yet another scroll to pop out. Unrolling the last scroll, he tapped on the kanji for Anbu and his Anbu uniform puffed into existence. He was back in action. Grinning exuberantly, he reached for the Anbu uniform before he paused. While the Anbu uniform was indeed made of tougher material than normal clothing, it would never be able to survive the abuse that he would put it through. Therefore, in at most a week, he would find himself once again in a shortage of clothing. This meant that he would have to reinforce his uniform. Sighing, he tapped the kanji for seals and all of his sealing equipment popped out, brushes, ink, the whole works. While the mental seals as he called them were very effective for short-term usage like in a battle, it was simply not worth the trouble to continue focusing on them for long-term seals like the ones he would need to reinforce his uniform. Thus, he had to do things the slow and traditional way. Uncapping the ink bottles and dipping his brush into them, Naruto began his tedious work. The work had certainly taken more out of him than he had expected. Continuous application of chakra in small and controlled amounts combined with the careful drawing of the seals, if even a small line was out of shape, his clothes could be incinerated, turn a bright pink or even blow up in his face caused quite a strain on his mind. However, he was now finished. The first seal he had created was one that would draw chakra from nearby living organisms to repair any damage done to his uniform. After all, this was his last one left. He had then gone to add elemental nullifying seals. While these were designed originally so that jutsus would do much less damage, Naruto decided that these would serve well in this world as the Pokégirls utilized elemental attacks as well. After that he added an impact absorption seal which as its name implied would absorb the force from a heavy impact. Designed originally by him and Jiraiya to protect them from Tsunade's and Sakura's inhuman strength, it had quickly developed into something that made the impact from a collapsing building feel only mildly uncomfortable. Since many Pokégirls in this had enhanced strength, Riley being one example, he decided it would be prudent to add on this seal. He had also drawn on gravity seals that he could activate, deactivate or change at will. While weights like Lee and Guy used were indeed useful for increasing one's strength and speed, the whole body was not developed. However, with this seal, a gravitational field would form around him that acted only on him and not his surrounding. This way, even if he was standing still, he would still be training as the gravitational field would still be acting on him, forcing his muscles to work in order to prevent him from slamming face down into the ground. Finally, he had added another seal that would render all of the previous seals invisible and carved his family symbol a spiral on the back of the uniform. Donning his uniform, he looked at his reflection in the full-body mirror that he had procured from the Master Scroll. He had on a black, form-fitting sleeveless shirt as well as similar pants. His, an unreflective gray in color, was strapped over his chest. His kunai and shuriken holster was strapped to his right thigh. He was wearing the traditional ninja sandals except that these were black with color. He was also wearing black gloves that reached up to the middle of bicep, with metal plates on the back of his hand to his forearm to protect his arm. Finally, instead of the traditional Hitai Atesh, forehead protectors, his was black in color, with the long straps hanging freely at the back of his head. The leaf etched on the metal plate was also black in color. All in all, he decided he looked good. Looking at the clock, he saw that it was already 4 a.m. in the morning. His body was also beginning to show signs of tiredness as the sealing had taken a tremendous amount of chakra. This was why such seals were not duplicated all over the world. The chakra cost would kill almost anyone. Heading up to his own bedroom, Naruto turned in for the night. When Naruto woke up, he felt totally refreshed, but when he looked at the clock right beside his bed, his eyes bugged out. 6 a.m. in the morning. What kind of freak did you turn me into, Kyuubi? Naruto screamed. After grumbling for a while, he decided that there was nothing to be done, so he entered the bathroom for his daily ablutions, after which he sat down in the living room, the area where he talked to Travis and worked on the Pokédex and seals, and looked into his seal for food to see what he had to eat. Let's see, Itachi's stash of Poké that I found in the Akatsuki base. Don't think that's a healthy choice for breakfast. My ramen, No way in hell I'm sharing that. Some of Konohamaru's candy I filched 6 years ago. Yuck. Some of Choji's snacks that I managed to grab. Man, that sure was a good training exercise. While normally very laid back and a very friendly person, once his food was in danger, he charged at his victim with the speed and force of a train, and nothing else. Oh well, guess it's time to go hunting then. Naruto then created a cage bunshin and ordered it to enter the woods and hunt for food. Or rather, it's time for my cage bunshin to hunt for food. Naruto snickered. Cage bunshin were just so useful. Since there was nothing else to do until his cage bunshin returned with whatever it had caught, he decided to get some training done. Lying flat on the floor, he stretched his arm out until his fingertips just barely touched the wall. Channeling chakra to his fingertips, he then began to climb up the wall using only his index and middle fingers. 2 hours later, he was halfway up the wall and sweat was pouring off him in the galleons. Just concentrating on controlling his chakra was tiring enough, but he had to make sure his body remained straight as a board and parallel to the ground. Added to that, the gravitational field was active, exerting a force of 5 times the normal gravity on him. He was about to drop down on the floor when he heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Pushing off the wall, he landed on his feet and greeted his frost whelp with a smile. "Good morning, Riley. Did you sleep well?" Riley woke up slowly, sitting up and rubbing the sleep out of her eyes blearily. Having only slept on the ground, grass or ice when she was still a feral, she had not ever enjoyed the comforts of a bed. But then again, how many tamed Pokégirls actually enjoyed the comforts of a bed? From the knowledge she had gleaned from the T2, she knew that most Pokégirls either slept on the floor or in their Pokeballs. Her new owner was certainly a strange character. A person from another dimension altogether with such a dangerous profession, and yet he still treated her like a human. While most tamers would have jumped her immediately, Naruto had barely even looked at her. Perhaps he was a homo? That would explain why she was tamed in a poke center instead of by Naruto. Shrugging, she decided that it was none of her business and exited the room, looking at the clock as she passed by it. It was only 8 a.m. According to the T2, most tamers woke up at 10 to 11 am, unused to a harsh life. Even professional tamers would only wake up at most 1 to 2 hours earlier than others. Since Naruto was still a rookie, she probably had plenty of time left and she wanted to use this time to explore this strange house she was living in. Once she opened the door, she was slightly startled and amused by the arrows that formed on the walls, with the words, "Follow the arrows," above the arrows. Following the instructions, she followed the arrows down a few winding corridors until she came to a flight of stairs. As she descended, she swore she had seen Naruto floating in midair, only his fingertips touching the wall. It appeared that she would have to get used to the fact that the strange would be the norm around her master. When she entered the living room, Naruto greeted her as if he was truly glad to see her, instead of the perfunctory greeting that most tamers gave. Some did not even greet their Pokégirls. Touched by this action, she replied with a smile. "I slept very well last night. It had been my first time in a bed and I found it very comfortable." Naruto was about to respond when suddenly his cage bunshin, holding a dead rabbit by its ears. "Only one rabbit?" he asked. "Well, the woods were really sparse, boss, and I didn't want to kill the rest of the rabbits as I am pretty sure they were the last ones here." Sighing, Naruto created another cage bunshin to skin, gut and then cook the rabbit that had been caught before he turned back to the first cage bunshin. "Very well then. I want you to go into town and look at how the currency looks like. I want every single detail. It seems we will have to buy food, and since I have no money currently, I'll just use a henge to scam the townspeople until I have enough money." Riley stood there stunned throughout the whole incident. Why were there 3 Narutos walking around and why did one suddenly pop into existence? Thinking back to the story he had told them the last time, she figured that the extra Narutos were probably the cage bunshins he was so proud about. Looking over at her master, Riley noticed that there was something different about him. I mean Naruto, Riley corrected herself when Naruto looked at her. Where did you get those new clothes? Oh, this was my old Anbu uniform. Now that we are talking about clothes, you need new clothes. That dress of yours is simply not combat worthy. Riley looked down at the white dress that the nurse Joy had given her. Naruto was right. The dress was too thin and would probably fall apart with one attack. Lost in her thoughts, Riley nearly missed the scroll that Naruto tossed at her. Inside the scroll is sealed all the female clothing that I possess. Don't ask why I own them. Anyways, just tap on the kanji for what you want and the clothes will pop out. Show me what you want later and I'll seal the rest back into the scroll. By the way, don't worry about whether it will fit you. I can change their size. Riley returned a few minutes with her choices. She had chosen a white long-sleeved shirt, black long pants with plenty of pocket, black combat boots and a pair of fingerless gloves. Naruto nodded approvingly at her choices. She would be able to hide weapons within her sleeves, giving her an advantage against any feral Pokégirl on in unofficial matches. The pants were the same. More pockets equals more places to hide stuff. Finally, the combat boots were made of a very tough but light material. Therefore, her movements would not be restricted but her kicks would definitely hurt. The gloves would also protect her hands while giving her the flexibility to slash at her enemies with her claws. Placing the clothes in front of him, he once again unsealed his sealing equipment. This time, however, he also unsealed something else: 20 packets of instant ramen. Creating another cage bunchen, he assigned this clone the task for carting his ramen to the microwave and serving him his ramen when he was ready. He then started to work on adding the seals to Riley's clothes. Since he had just done the exact same process a few hours ago, things were going much faster. 3 minutes after he started, he was served his first ramen cup by his cage bunchen. Without pausing at all, he grabbed a pair of chopsticks with his left hand and shoveled noodles into his mouth while drawing seals with his right hand. Riley stared at this spectacle. This was the clincher. Her master was officially the most weird, most screwed up person to have ever existed. When her rabbit arrived a few minutes later, she could chew methodically as she stared in morbid fascination at Naruto. When she finally finished her rabbit, she noticed that Naruto had already finished his 20 cups of ramen. After some time, Naruto finished with his seals and handed Riley her clothes while explaining the function of the seals. And inside this spiral, which Riley noted looked a lot like the spiral on the back of Naruto's armor, as a seal for chakra weights. Because your constitution is different from mine, I decided to give you chakra weights before moving on to gravitational seals. Anyways, to cancel the weights, either you or I merely need to smear some of our blood on the spiral and say, Kai. Since many tamers place their own symbols on their Pokégirls, marking the Pokégirls as theirs, the spiral will not look suspicious. I do not want anyone looking at the seal in detail. I did not make this seal invisible as I need to know where the seal is in order to channel my chakra into the seal. I am not a pervert and I do not want to grope you while attempting to add to your weights. You will also keep the weights on at all times except when you are sleeping or when I say that you can take a break so that your body will have time to build new muscles as well as get used to new speed that you will have without the weights. Now, do you understand everything? When Riley nodded, a sinister smile broke out on Naruto's face. Then let the training begin. Riley gasped as she entered the training room. Instead of the dojo she had expected, she had emerged into what seemed like a clearing in the forest. Through the use of multiple seals, I managed to link this room to my mind. In other words, anything that I think of will appear in here. However, they will exist only here and nowhere else. Naruto explained as he stepped up beside her. Now face me. When Riley turned around to face him, he touched the seal that was placed above her heart lightly, channeling his chakra into the seal. Riley suddenly felt as if she was encased in molten lead when she was slammed face down into the ground, creating a deep crater. Your first task is to get used to the weights and be able to stand up. Now hop on it. Naruto called down to Riley, to which he received a flurry of curses that made him chuckle. Now that is so unladylike. Less cursing and more working. You are going to walk to the living room and bed by yourself. If you can't, then you will simply have to sleep here on an empty stomach then. I am going to train by the trees. Call me only if you are dying. Yane. With that, Naruto sauntered off into the forest. Once inside the forest, Naruto once again created thousands of clones, dividing them into groups. One group was supposed to go through his taijutsu katas. While he would not reap the physical benefits of such an exercise, he would still gain the muscle memory of the clones, making the katas instinctive for him. Another group worked on seal-less jutsus. He had been able to do that once, but with his new chakra, he needed to work on it again. Finally, he assigned the last group to practicing with his elemental manipulation. Meanwhile, he himself would do physical exercises to keep himself in tip-top shape. He started out with 500 of sit-ups, push-ups, squats and crunches. He then sprinted flat out for 5 kilometers before he did his finger climbing exercise, the one where he climbs up the wall with his fingers, for half an hour. He would then repeat from the beginning. By the time 1 p.m. rolled around, both Tamer and Pokégirl had advanced quite a bit in their exercises. Riley had managed to stand up straight and was now attempting to walk, while Naruto had progressed far enough in his chakra that he was able to climb up 500 centimeters up a tree. Deciding it was time for a lunch break, he slowly climbed down the tree, still using only his fingers of course, and walked over to where Riley was. Riley, it's time for lunch now. Riley could only look at him dismayed. But I still take 5 minutes to move a single step. Naruto simply chuckled at her response. You really thought that I would do that to you? I am training you, not torturing you. Not much difference between the two though, hehe. Naruto mumbled the last part. Release your seal. Naruto watched as Riley struggled to lift her hand up to her mouth so that she could draw blood. It was not that surprising really. In fact, he was quite impressed that Riley had achieved so much in such a short time. It seemed that Pokégirls were indeed quite a tough bunch. After Riley had failed to even draw blood for the 5th time, Naruto released the seal for her and Riley collapsed onto the floor gratefully now that she would not break her bones if she dropped onto the floor. Naruto laughed at her state while she tried to glare fiercely at him, which failed miserably as she was lying face down in the dirt, only to laugh even louder at her weak attempts at glaring. Naruto finally decided to take pity on her and stopped laughing. Bending down, he picked her bridal style despite her protests and carried her towards the living room, placing her gently in a chair. As soon as they were seated, a cage bunshin started placing huge amounts of food on the table. How did you get so much food? Riley gasped. Naruto only smirked. It's a trade secret. Now eat. You are going to need the strength for the training later. While Riley paled a little at the thought of more training, the sight of the food seemed to energize her as she set about clearing the plates without further encouragement. Following Riley's actions, Naruto started to devour everything and anything edible in sight. After the meal they slumped back in their chairs sighing in satisfaction. However, Riley's relaxation was short-lived as they immediately went back to training, stopping only to take dinner. Finally, at about 10 p.m., Naruto called a halt to the training. He was pleased with what Riley had achieved today. From not being even able to stand up, Riley had improved to the point where she could brisk walk for 200 meters without taking a break and had managed to jog slowly for a total for 2 kilometers today, which was more than he had expected her to achieve. You have done very well today, far more than what I had expected actually. At this, Riley beamed with pride. However, training will not slow down because you have exceeded my expectations for today. Instead, the training will be more rigorous tomorrow. By the way, we will start training at 6 a.m. from tomorrow onwards and have breakfast at 8 a.m. I am planning to make you strong enough to take on the gym leaders with ease within 3 months' time, so you will be pushed to the limit. The only response he got was a tired groan and what sounded like a muttered, sadistic bastard. Grinning slightly, he released her seal and picked her up bridal style once more before carrying her to her room and tucking her into her bed. He was amused by the fact that Riley had fallen asleep in the middle and was actually snoring gently. Heading down to the living room, Naruto decided to look up the Pokédex to try and learn as much from it as possible since he had 6 hours to kill before he even felt tired. And thus the first month passed in this fashion. Over the month, Riley had truly improved in her physical conditioning. After 2 weeks, Naruto found Riley capable of handling the gravity seal and replaced her chakra weights seal with a gravitational field seal. In fact, Naruto found that Riley was very similar to him in the fact that both of them thrived under very harsh training conditions. Her strength had increased tremendously. While she was not able to create craters at will like Tsunade and Sakura, she could topple a stubby oak tree easily in one blow. Added to that, due to the running he had made her do constantly, her stamina had also increased and was able to fight for half an hour continuously with the seals on. What impressed Naruto the most though was her speed. Apparently, her natural speed and strength enhancements as a Pokégirl increased the more she trained. When she released the gravity seal, Naruto was sure that she would be able to give Lee and Guy a run for their money without their weights on. Riley was not the only one who had improved. Naruto had finally regained his ability to cast jutsus without using any hand seals. He had even discovered a new way to manipulate the fire element, causing the jutsus to emerge from his hands rather than from his mouth, which could be very troublesome sometimes. Finger climbing was now a breeze to him, and now he had moved on to doing one-finger push-ups with his body perpendicular to the ground while balancing on a kunai, continuously challenging a stream of chakra to create a layer between the kunai and his finger, preventing him from being impaled upon his own kunai. Naturally, this had freaked Riley out the first time she had seen him doing this exercise. In his late-night reading of the Pokédex, he had also found out some very interesting information. For example, he had read about 2 Pokégirls that had interested him. Shrine Maiden, the amateurish summoner Pokégirl. Shrine maidens appear to be no different than normal human women at first glance. Their height ranges from 4 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 2 inches. Their sizes usually start small, A to B cup, when they're young, but grow steadily until they're 18 to 22, when they're larger, C to DD cup. Their eyes are usually blue, gray or red. Their hair color tends to be black, but is sometimes pink. Their hair is rarely any other color. The Shrine Maiden's skin is quite smooth most of the time, but shifts to become tough and more like sandpaper when she is angered, which, tamers should note, occurs all over, even in their vagina, so don't piss her off during taming sessions. If a Pokégirl transforms into a Shrine Maiden, they usually, but not always, lose any blemishes or defects. Shrine maidens traditionally wear a scarlet red hakama, either pants or skirt, a white kimono shirt with swinging sleeves, and white socks known as tabi. She can decide to add ribbons or ornaments at her own discretion. Undergarments are entirely by their preference. Shrine maidens have occurred in low, but steady numbers, since 198 as. All that is known about Pokégirls evolving into Shrine Maidens is that it's never quite the same Pokégirl, nor is it the same stimulus. The few theories that exist that cannot be entirely denied usually indicate that a Pokégirl may be spiritually selected to become a Shrine Maiden when another Shrine Maiden is about to pass on or has already passed on, or the Pokégirl may have reached some point of spiritual enlightenment that wasn't apparent prior to evolution. Shrine maidens only need 5 hours of sleep to be at tip-top shape, but require an additional 2 hours of meditation in order to use her summoning ability. Another hour of prayer, preferably at a shrine of their chosen faith. Though she can use the symbol of her chosen faith for prayer, she just prefers a shrine, and at least twice a month, she must make an offering to her chosen faith, either in the form of food or money. Their partners are strongly encouraged to do the same, but it is not a requirement. Shrine maidens should not leave the shrines of their faith for prolonged periods of time, or else they will begin losing their powers, though they never lose access to their summoning contract ability because of this. There are 2 methods to sidestep this problem. The first method is a lengthy ritual involving cleansing her body of bad luck and wicked thoughts, meditation, and drinking a special herbal tea. The ritual is only effective for up to 2 months, meaning that she must return to the temple before then or face the degradation of her powers until she does make it back. The second method is for prolonged journeys which may go well beyond 2 months. Either the shrine maiden or their partner must bear a miniature shrine. The mini shrine is specially made to resist all normal forms of damage, but is generally between 50 to 150 pounds. This is to symbolically represent the burden that the shrine maiden bears in leaving the temple, and their partner must understand the depths of the shrine maiden's faith. Tamers have found that the mini shrine can also act as an early warning system, as it magically lightens when trouble is within 50 feet, but only remains light so long as danger is around. The shrine is enchanted so that it cannot be lost and returns to the shrine maiden's side the next night, but the shrine maiden must pray to it as soon as she is able. Some tamers may think to use the shrine as a shield, but doing so deliberately will incur the wrath of the shrine maiden, who will always instinctively know if the shrine is attacked. Unlike most other Pokégirls, it is deemed perfectly acceptable if a shrine maiden ditches an irresponsible tamer to head back to her home shrine if she had proper provocation, and few leagues will even attempt to help a tamer try to get their shrine maiden back, as it will result in a massive battle. The Indigo League attempted to return a shrine maiden to an irresponsible tamer in 243 as only to find 200 badly injured tamers and 500 sleeping Pokégirls on the battlefield. The shrine had only 3 shrine maidens and 1 shrine priestess to defend it, yet not one was injured or tired. Since then, it's been a universal taboo for leagues to interfere with a shrine maiden's business. Perhaps the most useful ability of the shrine maiden is her natural ability to summon Pokégirls. This ability tends to grab the nearest Pokégirl, but if a shrine maiden spends an extra round, or even 2, on the summoning, she can choose from a variety of Pokégirls to summon rather than just grabbing the nearest available one, though it seems to stop at a radius in miles equal to her level, so 5 miles at level 5, 15 miles at level 15, etc. If an appropriate one isn't found, she has expended the energy fruitlessly, so she must be careful. She can also cut any summon short, but this automatically occurs if she is rendered unconscious, either through exhaust or damage. A strong-willed Pokégirl can stay upwards of a turn after her summoner has fallen unconscious. Any summoned Pokégirl is generally willing to fight for the summoner, though any Pokégirl summoned via the summoning contract ability, more on that below, will always fight for the summoner. Initially, she can only use Summon Esper once per day, but as she grows in power and skill, she can summon more often. At level 15, she learns Summon Type, and at level 30, she can learn Summon Pokégirl. It's important to note that summoned Pokégirls, even the ones summoned via her summoning contract, cannot be captured, even with a Master Pokéball, nor do they die if slain. If a fatal blow is about to strike them, the magic of the summoning dispels, healing them and teleporting them back where they had come from. A skilled shrine maiden can even have the dispelling create a shockwave to disrupt the attack. Shortly after using a summoning, a shrine maiden becomes aroused. She can summon or maintain a Pokégirl to help satisfy her, but a tamer who satisfies her after a summoning is guaranteed a wild ride. She prefers any position where both she and her partner can equally gain pleasure, and likes to ensure that neither of them is benefiting too greatly for any position. She is often a very patient and understanding lover. Most shrine maidens will become a genuinely nice Pokégirl, though some may take longer than others to become as nice as shrine priestesses and may require some verbal prodding to correct their behavior. Once she's grown into her final personality, she can get along easily with most other Pokégirls, and only the most hardened can resist at least becoming a good friend. She strongly dislikes violence, focusing heavily on her healing and defensive arts, and will only fight for the sake of an innocent, herself or her loved ones. She is extraordinarily strong against ghost-type Pokégirls with her exorcism ability, but through strange circumstances, normal attacks do more damage than they really ought to. Perhaps it's a peculiar side effect of her genetics. Evil shrine maidens, though a minority amongst the already rare shrine maidens, will never allow themselves to tolerate being corrected, regardless of punishment. They often flock to religions that allow them to be as wicked as they want to be, and are usually seen accompanied by vampires or mazoku. Surprisingly, at least to those ignorant enough to confuse darkness with evil, Most dark-type Pokégirls instinctively loathe evil shrine maidens and will do what they can to disrupt the evil Pokégirls' activities. Evil shrine maidens never manage to live long enough to evolve into shrine priestesses, as they always seem to make a lethally stupid move, either by challenging a shrine priestess for power, trying to make a contract with a very dangerous Pokégirl, or by pissing off all of their summons, who invariably come hunting for the evil shrine maiden in question on the summon is done. One of the most unique abilities is the summoning contract. Tamers are not normally privy to the secrets of the contract, but most know it requires the shrine maiden to serve at the shrine for a year and 1 day to even get one, and no, her apprenticeship doesn't count towards this requirement. A pilgrimage to see a Pokégirl, usually one of a great power or standing. And the act of actually making an arrangement with said Pokégirl. The arrangement usually benefits the summon Pokégirl in some way. It varies based on what the summon Pokégirl wants, and allows the shrine maiden to call on the summon Pokégirl in times of crisis. The shrine maiden may not abuse the summon Pokégirl or break her trust, or else the contract will be broken and she can never summon that Pokégirl ever again, even with the other summoning magics. In order to activate summoning contract, the shrine maiden must bite her thumb and place at least 1 drop of her own blood on a stable surface, such as the ground, a wall, etc., which then creates a magical portal through which the summon Pokégirl will appear. Summoning contract allows the summon Pokégirl to last as long as the summon Pokégirl has health. She cannot be put to sleep, rendered unconscious by normal means other than health loss, stunned, paralyzed or frozen, though she can be affected by any other status ailments, both good and bad. The summon Pokégirl, depending on her personality, will either extract payment before each summoning or afterwards. If her trust or the contract is broken mid-summon, she can cancel a summons of her own will. The summon Pokégirl can even refuse a summons, but without a valid excuse, such as a violation of the contract, her conditions for being summoned not being fulfilled, or if she is pregnant and/or giving birth, she faces dire possibilities, which are outlined in the summon contract. Of course, she cannot be summoned if she is dead, but the summoner is instantly made aware of their death. The summoning contract turns completely black only when there is no chance of revival. A summon Pokégirl with a contract can refuse a summon from a Pokégirl who does not have a contract with her. A shrine maiden can make as many summoning contracts as she can effectively manage. It is not entirely impossible for a shrine maiden to have as many contracts as a tamer has Pokégirls, though she would likely be 30 years older before she had that many. One unique thing to note about the summoner cannot, in turn, be summoned while she is actively summoning. This means that 2 shrine maidens cannot summon each other at the same time, though they could feasibly trade off. Researchers believe that is because the summoner becomes akin to a ship that has dropped anchor while the summoned is like a lifeboat. As such, it's impossible to get the summoner summoned without negating or breaking her current summon. When it comes to combat, shrine maidens will usually follow the style that their shrine uses, but some will branch out and develop a unique style. If they learn a martial art or weapon style, it will usually be the one taught at the shrine or temple they serve at, though exceptions are allowed if the style or the instructor doesn't directly go against their religious beliefs. Pacifistic religions will often take up aikido or weapons that cause minimal lasting damage. Evil shrine maidens will seek out devastating or vicious styles. Perhaps some of the kinkier aspects of shrine maidens are once they come of tameable age, they can choose to engage in a ritual of womanhood, where she is introduced to by any Pokégirl at their shrine. After she is no longer a virgin, she can join in ritualistic orgies which occur on special days to their chosen religion. Shrine priestess, the master summoner Pokégirl. Shrine priestesses are generally taller and more elegant than their shrine maiden sisters. Their height ranges from 5 feet 3 inches to 6 feet 4 inches, their size is usually bigger, ranging from C to G cup, but their eyes and hair don't change. The shrine maiden's skin is tantalizingly soft and smooth, but retains the turn to sandpaper when pissed ability. Shrine priestesses carry an ethereal glow around them, which is made all the more potent on any night where moonlight is visible. They move with a grace and elegance that makes it seem as though they are gliding, even though they aren't. Their voices delight all listeners when she's happy and can terrify any intended recipient when she is angry or displeased. Shrine priestesses were once thought to be of the dragon element. This only partly understandable because of her ability to use dragon-type attacks, and when she's angry, people believed that the supposed dragon half of her became noticeable, as they can silence even those with the blood curse, insanely high stupidity, with a single word. Thus, one of the stupidest things one can do is piss off a shrine priestess. Supposedly further showing her dragon side, her hair will begin to levitate and her eyes become slitted as she becomes angry. Few can meet an angry shrine priestess gaze when she is mad. It's a commonly told rumor that a hild once flinched at meeting a shrine priestess angry gaze and fled shortly thereafter. Despite all of this speculation, though, the shrine priestess has been thoroughly proven to not be of the dragon element. A shrine priestess still does not like violence, but resorts to it when necessary. She determines the best way to resolve the conflict, either it is through an endurance battle or through a quick fight. Her perception is impeccable, allowing her to discern those who could be stopped without violence from those who will only be stopped with it. It is not entirely uncommon for a shrine maiden to ask a shrine priestess to be her first summon contract, though shrine priestesses often discourage that in favor of urging the shrine maiden to see the world. Unlike many ambitious shrine maidens, shrine priestesses don't feel the need to make a ton of summon contracts. They are content in finding good summon partners who they can rely on and ensuring that their relationship with their summons remains on good terms at all times. They will still retain any summon contracts they made prior to evolution, though. Shrine priestesses are good alphas for those few lucky tamers who help the shrine maiden evolve, and they are perhaps the best received as such. While not necessarily the best strategists or fighters, they don't gloat or have an overbearing ego, and they are fairly good at keeping other Pokégirls in line, though not necessarily keeping them out of trouble. A shrine priestess genuinely enjoys more tender intimacy, making her a good first partner for timid Pokégirls. Their soothing voice technique calms nervous, anxious or otherwise timid lovers while simultaneously exciting them. However, their libido is a curious thing. Their drive grows as they grow bored or feel relaxed, and goes down as they feel excitement or stress. This means that a shrine priestess at a popular shrine will require few tamings, while a shrine priestess at a less than popular shrine will become far more randy. Some will note that the shrine priestess, unlike the shrine maiden, does not require lengthy rituals or a shrine to carry when she leaves her temple or shrine for extended periods of time. This is because the shrine priestess is more of a representative of her religion, and as such, can do her prayers anywhere at any time. Those visiting unpopular shrines with shrine priestesses may find a bunch of brand new rituals or ceremonies that invite newcomers in. These rituals and ceremonies are often created on the spot to relieve the shrine priestess boredom and/or tension. Few complain about these brand new rituals or ceremonies, save when they are more weird and confusing than in nature. In some cases, shrine priestesses have been known to completely alter the religion they follow to satiate themselves, but eventually get around to telling their followers that she wasn't being serious. Eventually, the moment he had seen the words summoning, he had been glued to the article, reading everything mentioned about summoning and ignoring everything else. About 1 week after he started Riley's training, he had tried to summon the toads to see if they could communicate with his friends through the dimensions. Unfortunately, no matter how much chakra he pumped into the jutsu, he still could not summon even a tadpole. He had finally come to the conclusion that the moment he had died, in his world, the contract he had signed and become void, and even though the Kyuubi had reversed time, it was only on himself and not the whole world. Almost nothing could have that much energy. He had then made a mental note to visit one of these shrines someday and encounter a shrine maiden or shrine priestess, as they might be able to tell him how to solve his summoning problem, since their method of summoning was very similar to the shinobi's method. He had also come up with a method that might be able to get him back to his dimension. In his Pokédex, he had come across what was called Lost Tech and Forbidden Tech. Lost-Tech was apparently technology that was known in the late 20th or early 21st century that is either unknown now, or requires resources not available. Petrochemicals, for example, are in short supply and therefore the old fuel gasoline is rare. Plastics are usually recycled but are flimsier and less resistant to chemicals than some of the old types. The making of many of these old plastics is therefore lost-tech because no way has been found to make up for the lost source material. There are people known as reclaimers whose job it is to uncover lost-tech and find ways of reproducing it today. Forbidden tech, on the other hand, was technology banned since Sookbee's war and the backlash against the sciences of that time. Though many of the technologies have since been allowed, there are still many areas that are considered sealed. Weapons technologies, non-eco-friendly sources of power like coal or nuclear fission, and cybernetics are all considered sealed technologies. If petrochemicals had been more plentiful, it is likely that these would end up being sealed as well. There are periodic attempts by the medical community to lift bans on human genetic research, which so far have been only partially successful and then only in the indigo area. What Jutsu could not do alone, might perhaps be possible with the aid of technology. Unfortunately, he highly doubted that the government would simply let someone wander around collecting these valuable and dangerous technologies. Thanks again to his Pokédex, he had found an answer to his dilemma. Harem masters were gym leaders who were fully functioning members of the league who operate a league-sanctioned gym. There were also the wandering masters who still seek to perfect their craft on some self-determined quest. There are even masters who hire out their Pokégirls for more mundane tasks. If he became a harem master, he would use the excuse of a self-determined quest to hunt down the technology he needed for interdimensional transport. He did not doubt that he could achieve this. Riley was already well on her way to becoming a top-notch Pokégirl. Breaking himself out of his musings, he decided that Riley was ready to begin the second stage of her training. Well, Riley, you have done extremely well so far and I am pleased with you. Riley beamed at this compliment. She had learnt that Naruto, like his senseis, was a tough taskmaster, and while praise was hard to earn from him, he never lied. Riley listened attentively as Naruto continued. Your physical conditioning stage has been completed and it is time for you to move on to the next stage, control. You might be able to move at the speed of lightning and have the strength to lift up mountains, but all of it goes to waste unless you know how to use them properly. I have watched many Pokégirl video battles through my Pokédex that I hacked, and noticed that while the tamer does employ strategy, all a Pokégirl seems to do is blast what technique at full power. Any close combat fighting is simply spamming of special attacks like low kick and the like. That is simply stupid and a waste of energy. Therefore, I am going to teach you how to fight properly and not just brawl. This is a taijutsu style that I developed on my own through observing the Gyuken of the Hyugas. I have not taught it to anyone so far, so do not disappoint me. Riley nodded, wide-eyed. Teaching a Pokégirl a specific fighting was unheard of and totally radical. On the other hand, the way Naruto had explained it made it sound totally logical, and that any other way of fighting was foolish. Now she knew why his sensei called him the #1 surprising ninja. Riley broke out of her musings as she listened to Naruto's explanation. The name of this style is Sujin no Kensho, manifestation of the water god. As its name implies, what you are doing is trying to emulate water itself. There are no blocks in this style. You shall only dodge, flow around your enemy's movements just like the water in a peaceful lake does. When your opponent's guard is down, strike them hard and fast like a tsunami. Get into the rhythm of the battle. Ebb and flow just like the waves at the beach. That is the concept of the Sujin no Kensho. Riley listened mutely the whole time, fascinated by what Naruto had told her. Who knew that fighting could be an art form like Naruto had described? And now we will begin. This is the opening stance of the Sujin no Kensho. With that, Naruto began his demonstration and his lesson. Naruto watched with pride as Riley went through the katas for the Sujin no Kensho flawlessly, as though she had been practicing them since her birth. Pokégirls were truly made for battle. No human, other than one with a Sharingan, would have been able to master the katas for a whole style in 1 week no matter how simple the style was. Clapping his hands loudly, he waited for Riley to stop her training and approached him before he addressed her. You have done very well to master the katas in 1 week. However, just the katas is not enough. I will now teach you how to link the katas together to form an effective fighting style. Now get into the opening stance. Naruto watched as Riley got into the opening stance. She was crouched down, her legs spread apart with her right leg stretched in front of her. Her right arm was in line with her right leg, hands open and palm facing an imaginary opponent. Her left hand was held beside her chest, hands also open and facing the front. Naruto moved behind and held her arms with his and he moved with her while explaining the technicalities to her. Keep your feet firmly rooted on the ground. This way, it will be easy to switch from offense to defense and vice versa. There will be no aerial attacks unless you are sure that you can keep up a constant barrage and that your opponent is truly unable to counter you. Riley felt oddly flushed throughout the whole lesson. While moving with her was one of the most effective ways of teaching, it felt very intimate to her. The worst part was, she did not know if she liked or disliked it. Shaking her head, she tried to dislodge such thoughts from her mind. Frost whelps normally needed a taming only once every half a year and she had just undergone a taming cycle level 3 just a month ago. Resolving to put herself solely into training, she decided to not continue on her thoughts anymore. Who knew what her mind would come up with next? Riley had completed the second phase of her combat training and was now listening to what she would be doing next. Unfortunately, I cannot help you with this stage at all. Ignoring Riley's outraged cry of, why? The blonde continued on his explanation. First of all, I have been training you to fight like a human, and not a Pokégirl. Therefore, I want you to incorporate your Pokégirl attacks into the Sujin no Kensho and thus create your own style. Added to that, you have an extra appendage that I have utterly no idea on how it works. Naruto said, pointing to Riley's tail. You have 1 week to accomplish as much as you can. With that, Naruto left Riley to her own devices and began training himself. Finally, the 1 week was up and Naruto was intrigued on how much Riley had developed the Sujin no Kensho. Naruto arrived at where Riley was training just in time to see her deliver a vicious slash to a hapless tree, shredding the trunk into tiny slivers. I wonder what that poor tree did to you to deserve such a fate. Naruto teased, chuckling at the speed at which she had whirled around, surprise evident on her face. Now, the 1 week is up and I am going to evaluate how well you have done so. In order to do that, the best way will be to spar. Remove your gravity seals. I will not hold back. Naruto warned. Although still slightly stunned, Riley did as her master instructed and both settled into the opening stance of the Sujin no Kensho. Naruto wasted no time and he suddenly disappeared from view. Riley's eyes widened at such a display of speed. She was pretty sure he still had his gravity seals on, and she twisted her body around to the right, barely managing to dodge Naruto's punch. However, she was not safe yet as Naruto used his build-up momentum to spin around and deliver a roundhouse kick. Riley under his leg and came up with her arm raised, attempting to give Naruto an uppercut to the chin. Naruto simply continued his spin while dropping to the ground and then performed a sweep kick, causing Riley to jump up to dodge. Her stomach dropped as she noticed Naruto's predatory smirk. She had forgotten one of the first rules he had taught her. Always keep your feet firmly on the ground. Utilizing the momentum he had gained from the spin, Naruto sprang at Riley and socked her hard in the guts, causing her to double over in pain. At the same time, Naruto raised his knee and it connected solidly with Riley's face, sending Riley's head flying back. Finally, he performed a roundhouse kick Riley and sent her crashing into a tree where she collapsed, conscious but battered all over. Is that all you can do? It seems like you were nothing great after all. Naruto mocked. Without warning, Riley suddenly sprang at his, slashing at his face. Dodging to the side, Naruto nearly missed the tail whip that came crashing down on where he stood a second ago. While Tail Whip was normally a weak swat with the tail to break through the enemy's guards, the chakra weights had trained even the muscles in her tail and therefore the damage done was almost equal to an iron tail. However, Riley was far from done. She used a frost slash to slash at his face while simultaneously using another tail whip to swat at his legs, ensuring that he would be hit by at least one attack. Impressive, attacking two different areas to keep me off guard. It seems like she has been paying attention to my lessons after all. Unfortunately, this is still not good enough, Naruto thought. Naruto flipped over Riley's tail while bending his body backwards with his arms stretched out behind him, avoiding Riley's tail whip and watched as Riley's frost slash passed over his face barely an inch away. The moment his hands touched the ground, he pushed off with all of his strength and launched himself at Riley, feet first. The impact caused Riley to once again go flying into another tree. Very well done, Riley. It seems like you need a little motivation, but you did very good. Take the rest of the day to rest. We will continue sparring like this every day for the next week. The rest of the week passed with Master and Pokégirl sparring with each other. While Riley would never win Naruto, she did improve dramatically. As Naruto had learned in his first mission to Wave, nothing improved one more than actual combat. After the end of 2 months, he checked the information of his Pokégirl on his Pokédex. Riley the Frost Whelp, level 45. It was a rather impressive level, but Riley was still not strong, not enough for what he wanted. However, if his hunch proved, Riley would receive a major level boost. A common misconception of the level system of the Pokégirls was that the increase in abilities was a result of the Pokégirls leveling up. After much research, hacking, he had found that the truth was instead the reverse. Pokégirls gained levels when they had broken past the limit of the previous level. That would explain why Pokégirls gained levels easier while battling. In a battle, especially against a tough opponent, the Pokégirl would have to constantly be on her toes. In order to win a fight, the Pokégirl would pull out all the stops, pushing herself past her limits. Thus, a level up was registered. This was why Pokégirls tended to level slower when fighting against weak opponents rather than strong opponents. Against weaker opponents, they did not to push themselves so push and they would never break through the limit cap, so to speak, and thus they would not level up. After in-depth research, hacking into government files, he had found that the reason why a Pokégirl was able to gain more skills when she leveled up was because the evolution had a closer affinity to the Pokégirl's element, was able to manipulate it more easily. Therefore, by theory, it would be possible to train a starter Pokégirl to gain full mastery of her element. Going again by theory, since the Pokégirl would not be breaking the limits imposed on nature itself, the end result should be a huge increase in levels. Naruto had 1 month left before his self-set deadline and he would make full use of this month. Now to inform Riley about her new training schedule. What do you mean by make me learn advanced attacks? That is impossible, Riley exclaimed. This was beyond her master's normal insanity. Make a start Pokégirl learn the attacks of a final evolution. There was no way that could ever happen. Naruto merely looked at her amused. It was impossible for a 12-year-old academy student to master the Kage Bunshin in 1 night. It was impossible for a genin to outsmart a rank missing Nin Zabuza. It was impossible for the same genin to beat the heir of the Inuzuka clan in a fair fight. It was impossible for him to master summoning. It was once again impossible for him to beat the previous year's Rookie of the Year. It was impossible for him to defeat a Jinchuriki. It was impossible for him to master the Rasengan in simply 3 weeks. It was impossible for him to take the Rasengan further than its creator had. It was impossible for him to be able to control the power of the demon within him. It was impossible for him to recreate the jutsu that earned the 4th such fame, the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique. It was impossible for him to kill all of the Akatsuki members left alive. It was impossible for him to travel across dimensions and reverse the flow of time. Naruto stopped and looked at Riley after he had listed off the impossibilities that he had achieved. Riley stared dumbfounded at Naruto. It was true that her master had a reputation of making the impossible possible. Okay then, how do we go about doing this? Naruto grinned. He knew that she would see it his way. Riley sat down on the chair that had suddenly appeared out of thin air as she listened to Naruto in his lecture mode, which was simply him reclining on a sofa with his legs on a table. Both had miraculously appeared out of nowhere as well. Now, as I have told you before, rare elements are simply a fusion of two different basic elements. For example, the wood element which this house is created from is a fusion of earth and water. Ice, which you possess, is a fusion of wind and water. Therefore, this would mean you possess very high manipulation of wind and water within you. We are going to do this in a few steps. First of all will be for you to recognize and summon the different affinities within you at will. Next will be manipulating these separate elements until you can do anything you want with them. Finally, you will learn to fuse these elements together. By fusing the two elements by yourself instead of letting your innate Pokégirl nature do it for you, you are gaining an understanding of how your elements. In most cases, the Pokégirls' minds simply follow their bodies. In other words, only when they are of a high enough level will the body allow the mind access to the knowledge on how to perform a particular attack. However, in this case you would be training your mind, so to speak. You do not have to wait for your body to allow you the knowledge because you already possess the knowledge. Finally, with the mastery of the ice element, you are not limited to only the existing that Pokégirls have programmed into their bodies. You can create your own attacks. Riley gaped at what this might portend. Her master was truly a genius. If she was able to create and perform attacks at will, she would be a practical god among the Pokégirls. Unfortunately, for you to be skilled enough to create your own attacks will probably take you years of hard work. However, you will still be able to make even a frost slash deal as much damage as an ice beam at point blank range within, say, a year. It would take a lot of hard work, but I have faith in you. Riley smiled warmly at his praise while squashing the strange tingly feeling that had occurred whenever she received praise from him or when he came into skin contact with her. The 3 months had finally come to an end. The last month had proven very fruitful as his theory had turned out to be correct. Riley had been so elated on her first success that she had jumped on him, hugging him tightly before jumping away, her face almost as red as Hinata. Suddenly, his comlink beeped loudly, signaling that someone was calling him. Opening it up, Travis's face popped in view. Naruto, come to the Poke Center immediately. There is an emergency and your help is needed.